Hey everyone, Rachel here with Things We Wear, and today we're going to talk about Accumark Explorer and what it is all about. So, basic intro, or maybe you've already been using Accumark Explorer and the Gerber pattern design program, but you just want some additional background info. This is for you. So this is a really old computer. It has Accumark version 9. You can see I haven't even activated Windows. I only use this computer for Accumark. I have not upgraded to the newest version of Accumark. I think they're on version 12 right now. It's just super expensive and way too out of my price range as much as I'd love to own it. So this is what I'm using. It's this old computer. And it works fine. It does what I need to do in case I do need to work in Accumark. Although at this point, if you see my other videos, I have made the switch to Tech because it is so much more affordable and they offer subscription plans and it's easy to sign up and you don't need to go through salespeople. You can just click a button, which is great. All right, so the first basic is that Accumark, its files live in these folders here. This first folder, which will automatically come with your Accumark setup, the digitizer folder. If you have a digitizer set up, this is where when you digitize files, it will plop in right here. Everybody also gets this folder, Data 90, and it comes with like some basic patterns here. So you have your French curves and like this raglan block, pant block, blouse, top, cami. I don't really think these are like good patterns, but they're good patterns for if you want to experiment a little bit, if you're new at pattern making and you just want to like see what's there. This is a great place to start, and definitely how I started, like playing around with making pattern adjustments. It's nice when you have something kind of already set up. All right, so let's add these other folders are folders I've used for clients of mine, so I'm not going to show you that, but I'm going to click on the C drive and then I'm going to add a new folder. So I have the option to add a version 8 or version 9 folder. I'm going to add a version 9, but just know that, so version 9 will work with anyone who has version 9 and up. If you're working with anyone who has version 8, you're going to want to create a version 8 storage area because they won't be able to use the version 9 files. So the version 8 and version 9 are not compatible. So you do need to create a version 8 storage area if that's something you want to do. I'm sort of on the side of I make everything in version 8 right now because most people I work with are using version 8. 8.5 seems to be like the last thing that a lot of people have, it seems like a lot of places just kind of like stopped upgrading at 8.5. And to be honest, I think that the upgrades that were offered post 8.5 are pretty minimal. And other than 3D, they do offer 3D now with their newer plans, but I don't know how many people are really using that, or if they're using it, I feel like the people who are using 3D pattern making are not necessarily the people who are doing production patterns and grading, and those can kind of reside in different areas. So long story short, I feel like a lot of people are still using version 8. So I'm going to make a version 8 storage area, and I'll call it my YouTube storage area. Cool. So now that that's there, you'll see it doesn't show up. Here's the trick with Accumark. You have to press, oops, I guess it's thinking. You have to press F5 to get it to refresh, and then your folder will magically show up. And we'll give it a second here. Old computer. Yeah, as we're waiting, so just a little bit more about me. I've been using Accumark since 2008-ish, so pretty long time. And I worked as a production pattern maker for a very long time. I've only recently stopped really doing much of that. And here it is. I didn't even have to press F5. So here's our new storage area. You'll notice that this is missing. Well, I'll tell you what it's missing. All right, so let's talk about data types. And I'm going to close out of this just so I can show you how. So here's your new folder, and you'll see that right now we just have this one thing, the user environment. The user environment has information about the specific folder, and if it'll let me open it, I'll show you more about that. It can get a little overwhelming because there's a lot of file types. I won't take you through all of them. Some of them you probably don't even need to worry about. But so user environment, this is where you're going to choose if you want metric or imperial. So I'm going to want this folder to be imperial because I am in the United States and we Do not use metric. Precision, seam allowance. Yeah, oh, that's fine. Mostly just imperial is what I'm focused on here. So I'm going to press save. I don't know if it's saved. Okay, it says ready. So I'm going to close out. All right, so now I'm going to click on these three dots right here. And this is going to show me what kind of documents are currently being shown. So these are all on the left side, these are all the documents that could be shown. It's a lot of documents. And these are the ones that we are looking at. So let's say I'm a pattern maker. I only want to see my model and my pieces. That's pretty typical. If you're a marker maker or a grader, you might want to see markers, orders. You need rule tables. You need a lot of stuff. It can be a little bit different. Annotation. There's a lot of stuff here, right? If you want to start fresh, let's say there's a lot of things, just press clear. Or if you want to just add them all, click that. So over here is the type of data, and over here is the type of data it's going to show you. So it's just hiding this data as like a courtesy for those of us that are like, this is too much. So you get to choose. I'm going to put it all there so we can see what's there. All right, so it's not a lot of stuff so far. So first we have the user environment, which we already talked about. The piece plot, this is usually information on how to use your Accumark plotter. I am not an expert at this, but yeah, this is kind of about like if you have a line type that's a certain type of line, like let's say you have an internal line, is it going to be written out or is it going to be cut on your plotter? If you're not plotting, don't worry about this. And if you are plotting, it is likely that I would say you probably work somewhere where it's already been set up and these annotations or this piece plot has been written out. And what you need if you want to plot is to find out what exactly these details are so you can get exactly those details and write them in. But you can kind of get your way through it if you needed to set it up yourself. There's some things here like if you're plotting, are you going to plot all this information on the marker? Are you going to plot at 100%? Are you going to rotate your pieces? There's some things here. You're going to plot nests or single, if you have it graded. But for the most part, if you are a pattern maker, we don't need, don't worry about this unless someone says, okay, we need to set up your piece plot. This isn't not super important right now. P notch, this actually is kind of important. So let's open this. So this is your notch table. And basically your notch table is going to tell you what kind of notches when you go into Accumark or when you go into pattern design and you label each notch type. You can label it a type 1, a type 2, type 3, type 4. This is telling you what a type 1 is. So if you label your notches type 1, you're going to get a slit. But you could make it a T. I really love a T. You could make it a castle notch, all sorts of things. Let's make it a V. And this determines how large it is. So a V notch, according to Accumark, you can see they've grayed out the inside. This is strictly an outer notch, and you can tell. So let's say you want it to extend 1/4 of an inch, and you want it to have, oh, maybe that's width. Okay, so the perimeter width is 1/4 of an inch, and the depth is 0.16. So it's not giving you an inside option. Now let's see if we chose a T notch, which is usually an inward notch. See, now it's giving you an inside option. So again, let's say we want the T width to be 1/4 of an inch, and then the depth, I'm going to make it a nice big notch. I like big notches. They're just easy to see, right? You do have to be careful with big notches, though, depending on your seam allowance and what kind of fabrication you have and your cutting room and how many plies you're doing. So this really, I find, as a pattern maker, I specify what I like when I'm doing sample patterns. And of course, all of that has to do with my sample maker as well. If they want a specific type of notch, usually sample makers will want specific type of notches in specific places. And some sample makers will be very vocal about not having too many notches or having just the right number of notches. So definitely communicate with the person who will be sewing your garment. If that person is you, then you can do whatever you want. But one thing I've found is that I find the subject of notches can be a hot button issue. And a lot of people think that you have to have a lot of notches. And I would say, after working as a production pattern maker now for 12 years, the thing that seems to be conclusive is that you want notches in key places, but you don't want too many notches, because too many notches is confusing. It's extra work. It's easier if you have too many notches, it can easily be flipped around and gotten confused. So use notches strategically, make it very clear what the notch is for. Don't just notch all over the place just to have notches. That's not helpful. It's not helpful to anyone. I feel like a notch is kind of like a comma. It's often overused, and I don't think a lot of people really quite understand where to use it. So if you don't know where, check in with the person making your garment, ask them what they like, and then try to cater it to them. And all that has to do with also what type of notch they want. A lot of sample makers do not like the V notch. This is an outward notch because you have to cut it off as you're sewing. But some won't like the inward notch because they'll say that it causes holes if it's not cut well. So, chat with them, see what works. I'm going to keep this, so I'm just going to press save. And of course, you could have, let's say, type 2 notch. You could make it a V, type 3, a castle. So these are all ways that you can specify what type of notches you have. And one thing you might notice is if you bring in someone else's pattern, they might have a different notch table than you. So what their type 2 might not match what your type 2 is. And if that's going to be an issue, if you need your notches to be aligned, then ask for their notch table, and you can just import that into a folder that's just for that particular person or client, and then you can have the same notches and be on the same page. But that's definitely an important key, because this is very different than how Optitex and Tüketech work. Optitex and Tüketech, the notch type resides within the piece. You specify the notch type on the piece or on the file as the whole, the pattern file. In Accumark, you're specifying for this whole folder. Anything within this folder is abiding by these rules. So a little bit different. Oh, because I didn't fill it out. I'm just going to close. No, we don't need to save. All right, let's keep going. So P marker plot, lay rule plot. So these are going to be for your marker making. If you are, again, if you're just making a sample, you probably don't need to worry about this. This is really for production. But this is just going to give basics to when you create a marker, how it's going to bundle the pieces together, and how much space there's going to be between pieces. Let's see here, if you're rotating plot separation. There's a lot of little specific things. So if you're not a production marker maker, or you're not a marker maker, I don't think you need to worry about that one. So just going to close out. Cool. Lay rule. This one might be important if you're plotting. And I'll open up that one. So lay rule, this kind of tells you, how to describe lay rule. Again, this is something that probably, if you are a pattern maker, you're working with a place or a marker maker or a grader who has a lay rule that they want you to use. And the lay rule basically is saying, it's basically outlining like how the pieces are going to plot and what the rules around that are. In short, it's going to be like, so let's say you have a velvet that has to be cut in one direction. You can only cut velvet in one direction, right? It can't be cut with the nap. I mean, you could cut it with the nap up or down, but it all has to be the same within a given piece. So you can't have size small have the nap go up and size medium have the nap go down. Often in markers, you'll see that pieces get flipped back and forth. So for that, in that instance, you'll want everything to lay in the same direction. And that's what the lay rules are for, is they're going to say like, hey, everything for this lay rule, everything's going to lay in the same direction. Or it's okay if things don't lay in the same direction. Maybe you have a cotton woven fabric that is like very much the same in both directions. And then you can use it using both directions. You can cut your sleeve, one sleeve going up, one sleeve going down. It doesn't make a difference. And then you save on marker, or you improve your marker efficiency and save on fabric. So that's my short explanation, and we can go into that more later. P-cutter, again, this is more related to the plotting. I'm not going to open that. Order. Okay, so orders are, this is what you're going to create a marker. And depending on your software and your plotter setup, you might have to use orders to plot. I think it depends on your setup. But basically, an order is like you take a pattern and you create a marker. Let's say I'm going to call this my YouTube marker. And I'm going to date it today. And I can say, you can write whatever you want in these fields. It does not affect, it might get printed out on the marker, but it doesn't affect the marker. And I'll just say, oh, this is just a test. And this is where you're going to specify when you're plotting, like, oh, my fabric width is actually only 45. And you could use this for shrink stretch. I never do that. I always do that in the pattern. You can add your lay limits in your annotation, which we'll talk about. This is just like specifying what size lettering you have, where it goes, what kind of information is plotted on each piece. You choose your notch table. And you can have multiple notch tables within one folder if you want. So you have to choose that. And you choose it by clicking on the box, and then you click on these 3 dots, which you'll quickly realize is like Accumark default. So it's already selected our P notch, lay limits. And then you would pull in the model, which I don't have one yet, so I can't pull anything in. But you pull it in, you request the size. Let's say I want small, and I want 1 or 3. And then I press process, and it's going to spit out a marker, and then you go in and adjust that marker to your specifications, and then you can plot it out. So this is kind of like the next step to creating a marker if you are a marker maker or interested in that. Nope. All right, so let's create a model. File, new model. And you'll notice I have to be within this folder or selected. Might take a moment here. There it is. Okay, so let's call this model 1. And I'm going to save this. Model 1. Save. So I currently have no pieces. This is a problem, right? So when I do have pieces, once I go into pattern design and I have those pieces, I'm going to click on this little button here. So you just have to select the box, click on the 3 dots, again, the default Accumark thing, and you'll see all your pieces here. If you want to search for a piece, you use the star button, and the piece, let's say it's a number or whatever, and then you can click enter, and it'll filter out anything that doesn't match that. And then you can select all those pieces by holding down the shift button and click open, and it will add to your model. And basically what your model is like a cutter's must. So let me create a piece, and then I can show you how that works. Here we go. So if you are watching along today, if you wouldn't mind leaving me a comment and letting me know what version of Accumark you currently use and what you use it for, if there's something specific you'd like to learn, or if this video has been helpful for you, I'd love to know about that too. So please leave me a comment, and also like, subscribe, all the things. It helps me know that this video is helpful, and then I'll make more of them. So, but if nobody's watching, then, maybe I'll hold off for a bit. Sorry, pattern design is very slow, so we'll get there. I'd also love to know, if you are commenting, please let me know where you're located. It can be general, but I'm kind of curious, people using Accumark out there, are you guys in the US? Are you in LA? Like, are you using it on the job? Are you using it at home? What's your setup like? I think Accumark seems to be so ubiquitous in this world, but at the same time, I don't know. It's weirdly, it's just a weird program, and it's hard to get access to because of the expense. So just curious who's out there using it. All right, these are just some autosaves. I don't need this. We don't need no autosaves. All right, so let's do create. Again, this is Pattern Design 9. So you'll notice if you're used to 8.5 or 8.3, the menu is a bit different. One thing I've done to help myself, because I actually hate this menu and I just want nothing to, I mean, I already learned this. I don't need to relearn it. But so I brought in all my toolbars here. So it does kind of help me. The icons look a little bit different, but for the most part, I brought in the things that I use a lot and I kind of know where they are, which really helps me speed up my process. I find using the menu when I don't know where things are to be very slow. All right, so I'm going to create a rectangle. And if I click both my right and my left mouse buttons at the same time, my bunny ears, it's going to give me this option to say, all right, how big do I want it? So I'm going to make it, again, 23 inches. Let's make it 9 inches high. Click OK. And there it is. I'm going to call it my front. All right. And unfortunately, I can't zoom in this program. So, oops. Still in that. You got to cancel out or you'll be stuck in there forever. I lost my piece. I'm going to press F4. Let's get recentered here. That didn't work. Let's try again. There we go. F4. All right, this isn't really an Accumark tutorial, so we'll do one later. But here's a neckline. Right click OK. And let's see here. Ooh, modify. This is the part where I get confused. This is where I just am like, I want my 8.5 back. I'm looking for line replace line because that's how I'm going to switch this line for these, and then it'll be a neckline. I don't see it off the top of my head. Oh, there it is. Replace. Okay, so I'm going to select the internal line. Right click OK. I'm going to start perimeter point here. There we go. I got a neckline. All right, I'm just going to leave it like this because this is not the point of today. But one thing again with Accumark is you are having to save each piece. Oh, it can't save to selected storage area. Why not? All right, let's try YouTube. All right, let's try again. Save. All right, it worked. Great. All right, so I'm going to close out of this. The auto-saving of data. Please save your data for each... Okay, this is just about those files that it asked me about. I don't need those files. We're good. Okay, so now we're back in Accumark Explorer. This is the trick to Accumark Explorer. It does not refresh on its own. You have to press F5. Look, and there's our model. And do we have a piece? Oh, there it is. Front piece. All right, so I'm going to add this to my model. So I'm going to click on that box. I'm going to select it, open. Okay, so now here's the part that this is important. So this is where you're going to tell Accumark, this is basically your cutter's must. They call it a model. It's more or less a cutter's must. And this is what I mean by Accumark is really set up in the way of like old school pattern making. This is the process. They really function in that same, there's nothing, it's basically like a digital version of the traditional way of garment production. So if you know about garment production, then this will make sense to you. So in your cutter's must, you're going to write front, the category can just be front. Piece category has to be unique. So if I have a front facing, it has to say front facing and not just front. And then piece description, there are 3 fabrics. Interesting. Okay, so here I'm going to write cut 1 because what I didn't do and show you how to do, but I would mirror this line here. So it's just a 1. And the fabric is going to be self. So I'm just going to put an S there. And if you don't know, self refers to the body of any fabric. Self is just whatever the base fabric is. And then any other fabric you're going to call out. So if there was a rib cuff, I would write an R for rib. Some people use a C for combo. Although I like to be more specific, I think R is more specific because you might have more than one combo fabric. So let's say you have self, you have a rib trim, and then you have, what else would you even have? Let's say you have a lining fabric that's used for a pocket bag. So then I would use L there. And if you had two different colors, let's say self on the front was green and self on the back was blue. So I would just put self A. Oops. Oh, I guess this is something about, this is like a new thing. You can't put two letters. Self A, and then the other one would be self B. And up here I would write self A equals green, plus B equals blue. So I would just like to make it super clear so that if anyone opens my pattern, they know exactly what they're getting. And then here, this is where you're going to specify where and how it's going to get cut. So you're going to have one as it is already. It's already in this orientation with the grain line facing that way. Now let's say you wanted to flip it on the x-axis, and the x-axis is right here. You could put a 1 there, but I don't want to. I'm only cutting 1, so I'm just going to put 0 for the other ones. And I don't really use these other comments, shrink, stretch, blah, blah, blah. No. I do that in my pattern. I don't want to automatically shrink and stretch. That sounds scary. I want to know what the pattern measures before if I do have shrinkage or stretch in my pattern, I do it myself and I write it down what it's going to be, because you may know, but patterns do not always shrink or stretch in the same way across the body of the pattern. You might get more shrink in an area where there are fewer seams and more stretch in an area where there are more seams. So a neckline might stretch, whereas a bust might shrink. So it's hard to uniformly add shrinkage or stretch onto a garment. You really have to test that specific fabric, that specific wash, and know where it is growing and shrinking and then adjust for it. So only maybe in the initial cutting will I kind of more generically add shrinkage and stretch. But once you get further along in the development, I've never ever been like 5%. Go for it. It's much more complicated than that, but to each their own. It might be in something like denim, maybe you'll have more stability. I'm used to working with knits, which are like pretty unstable. So yeah, you never make assumptions. So that's it. And then you press save. And now my model is saved and I'm good to go. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I know that was a bit long, but hopefully helpful. And again, please leave me a comment. Let me know where you're at, what you're learning, what kind of software you're using, and what you're hoping to learn in the future. And I will do a video in the future to try to address that. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.